Hey guys, it's Cheesy. So for today's video, I decided to share my top 20 tips for getting started in Elden Ring. For those of you that don't know, Elden Ring is an open world Soulsborne style game. With all that being said and done, here are my top 20 tips for Elden Ring beginners. So for the first tip, I wanted to explain what Grace is and why it's important for game progression. Sites of Grace are yellow golden rays of light that give you a new fast travel location once you discover them. Once you discover a site of Grace, you'll get the ability to rest. Resting gives you options such as memorizing spells and upgrading your flasks. And it will also refill your health in current flasks. Keep in mind that it will also respawn all non-boss enemies in your current area. Tip number 2 is to be aware of nearby Stakes of Marika. Stakes of Marika are small statues of a woman with broken off arms. These stakes are important because they can give you an alternate respawn point, and depending on your situation, it might be better to spawn at a Stake of Marika rather than a Site of Grace. Stakes of Marika are typically located near bosses or tough enemies and save you from having to take a trek from wherever the last Site of Grace you visited was. Tip number 3 is to upgrade your flasks. This might seem a bit more obvious, but I didn't have a clue why or how to upgrade my flasks. Flasks are essential for survival in the lands between, and as such, upgrading them to reflect your current level and zone is pretty essential as well. The way you upgrade your flasks is by finding golden seeds, which are located in your small golden trees, and by finding sacred tears, which are located in most churches. You can use these at a Site of Grace, and just like that, your flasks are doing more than they were before. Tip number 4 is a quick crash course on crafting. In the church immediately to the north of the starting area is a merchant named Kale. Talk to him and buy a crafting kit as soon as possible. The crafting kit will help you to craft items that might just help you out of a pickle. In order to craft items, you need to find various crafting materials that can be located all throughout the lands between. These said materials have no carry weight, so feel free to pick up as many as you'd like. Additionally, if you'd like more crafting options, you can find and purchase many different crafting recipes from around the world. Tip number 5 is to buy a lantern or a torch to light up dark caves and other areas. By talking to Kale, which is the same merchant you can buy a crafting kit from, you have an option to buy a torch. A torch is very important because there are many areas in the game that can be a total slog without some source of light. You can equip it to your offhand and use it while being able to fight and perform other functions you'd need to do. If you'd like to have both hands free to fight with, however, you can find a lantern at a couple of different merchants, which can also be incredibly helpful. The lantern is best used by adding it to your quick select pouch. The quick select pouch can be customized in the top right hand of the pause menu, and it can be used by holding triangle or Y and selecting the appropriate item with your D-pad. Tip number 6 concerns runes, specifically the ones you can pick up and hold on to without a risk of losing them when you die. You can find these by crushing glowing skulls, looting cemeteries, or just by exploring the world. Contrary to popular belief, I believe the best use of these is to spend them within a couple of hours of collection. The reason being that as you level and progress to harder zones, the runes you collect will offer more and more for leveling up. The problem with holding onto them for a long period of time is that they start to lose their value. 500 runes at the start of the game is worth a lot less than 500 runes, say 20 hours into the game. Sometimes holding onto them for a quick level for a boss or some cool items can be worthwhile, but in general, I would say use them when they are the most valuable. Tip number 7 concerns carry weight and attribute scaling. Both of these pertain to weapon and armor selection done by you. In total, the weapons and armor you carry should be less than 70% of your total carry weight. Passing that threshold will cause you to do what is known as a fat man roll and make you easier to be hit by enemies. Sometimes you will need to equip lower quality armor for a bigger weapon or go for a lighter weapon entirely. In terms of weapon selection, attribute scaling is another important thing to consider. Naturally, I didn't pay attention to this until way too late into the game, but weapons have different ratings, ranging from E being the lowest to S being the highest. Pumping your levels into attributes that are higher will increase your damage dealt with that weapon. This is important to know when planning builds and deciding where to dump your points. Tip number 8 is to try two-handing, which is more of a general combat tip, but another thing I didn't figure out until way later in the game. Depending on your playstyle or build, two-handing can be really beneficial. It can greatly increase the amount of damage you can do and allow you to perform new movesets as well. Sometimes dual wielding or using a shield can be better, but again it kinda all boils down to your build. I will say that I ran with a shield for a long time, but I rarely ever used it. If I had just been two-handing that whole time, my life probably would have been a lot easier. The way you two-hand is by holding triangle and pressing the corresponding R1 or L1 button for PlayStation controllers. It is the same process for Xbox, just with their relevant buttons. So tip number 9 is another quick crash course on sorceries and incantations. In order to use these, you need memory, which can be increased by finding various memory stones located throughout the lands between. They are decently rare and there's only a handful in the game. The way you equip the spells themselves is by resting outside of Grace and choosing Memorize Spells. Once you memorize the spells you'd like to use, there is one more step. In order to use these, you'll need to have either a staff or a seal. Once you have one of these equipped, your spell will be mapped to your attack button, and you can rotate through the spells by pressing up on the D-pad. Keep in mind, many spells will have attribute requirements. Tip number 10 is another general combat tip, which is to perform guard counters. If you opted to not two-hand, and prefer to use a shield in your offhand, then I have a tip for you as well. If you block a hit from an enemy and immediately push R2, then you will unleash a devastating guard counterattack. These can be invaluable if you are forced to play on the defensive or if you are fighting a high mobility attacker. Tip 11 is yet another combat mechanic that was introduced in Elden Ring, which is the jump attack. Jump attacks are great because they do a lot of damage and cause you to break enemies' poise faster. Jump attacks are an all-around good mechanic and can put you in a stronger position in a fight. One thing to keep in mind is that there are enemies with high mobility, or that can fly, that can be challenging to hit without the proper timing. Tip number 12 is to upgrade your weapons. You can first upgrade your weapon in the church north of the starting area, but there are many more stones located throughout the lands between to help you further upgrade your armaments. Upgrading your weapons is important for keeping your damage output at a good level. Upgrading your weapons can also cause the attribute scaling to improve, thus further improving the weapon's efficiency. Tip number 13 is to be aware of all the different status effects and what they do. Poison, Scarlet Rot, Death Blight, and others are all status effects that can affect you and, well, really ruin your day. Knowing the damage output they could deal to you can help you to make the smart decision to stay alive. Fortunately, you can also find many weapons throughout the lands between that can afflict an enemy with these negative status effects as well. These can be incredibly useful against bosses and can take a decent chunk of their health away without too much effort. Tip number 14 is to know your mount. Torrent is a mount you can acquire very early in the game, and he can just be incredibly helpful. Torrent can double jump and also traverse poison and Scarlet Rot lakes without taking any damage. You're even able to heal Torrent with craftable items such as Roa Raisins. Tip number 15 is a Spirit Calling Bell. The Spirit Calling Bell is acquired by talking to the witch Rena at the aforementioned church. Alternatively, if you progress far enough into the game, you can acquire it from the Twin Maiden husks at the Round Table Hold. The Spirit Calling Bell is a strong item that can allow you to summon ashen spirits to fight alongside you. You can, and probably should, equip your spirit of choice to your quick pouch so you can summon them quickly and safely. There are many different spirit summons in the game, so feel free to experiment and find one that complements your playstyle. Keep in mind that most of them require FP or health to summon, so just make sure you have enough on hand to summon them. Tip number 16 is to try exploring lands between at different times of the day. There are sometimes unique interactions you can miss or bosses you could have fought if you came to the same area later or earlier. This isn't a huge problem, but more of a fun way to find cool secret encounters. Tip number 17 is to just use the Stone Sword keys. Stone Sword keys are actually pretty common in the lands between, and as such you really shouldn't be afraid to use them. Sometimes they can really pay off. If you do decide to save them, make sure to mark the location on your map so you can revisit it later. If you'd like to find some Stone Sword keys quickly, you can try visiting a couple different merchants. Tip number 18 is to be aware of hidden walls, floors, and pathways. I remember when I saw a message for what seemed to be the millionth time about a hidden wall and decided to try hitting the wall, and well, I found a chest with a cool item in it. Finding that treasure made me stress over all the potentially hidden secrets I might have missed from ignoring the messages scrolled on the floor. Now every message is to be trusted, but typically I don't think it hurts to check. I found hidden floors, hidden walls, and even a couple of invisible paths that you just never would have thought to even look for. You won't break the game not looking for these, but they can be a fun side objective and lead you to cool loot or a boss encounter. Tip number 19 is to make use of the map. There are many markers and beacons you can place on the map to mark areas you've cleared or areas you still need to do, or farming areas, items, or really anything. To make full use of the map, you'll need to find stone obelisks scattered throughout the map that have a map attached to them. These will expand the area that you can see from the map and just make the whole thing look a lot better looking as well. Now the final tip is to just stay away from dogs. These guys will seriously haunt your nightmares. They are able to burst you down and destroy your poise. Sadly, I don't really have a clue what to do with them, so I'll just give you a bonus tip instead. Bonus tip number 21 is to find the Flask of Wondrous Physique. This flask can be found in northeastern Limgrave and can completely change the way you approach the game. There are many items you can find that you can use to mix a flask and have it do different effects. This flask can really save your life and is definitely worth placing in the quick bar with your other flasks. Well everybody, that concludes my 20, or I guess 21 tips for a beginning Elden Ring player. I sincerely hope that you found these tips helpful for your first playthrough. Many of these tips are things I wish I had known about or employed more during my first playthrough of Elden Ring. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more videos like it, consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean a lot to me, and I try to post about once or twice a week. Feel free to like, comment, or otherwise interact with my channel. And with that being said, I'm going to call it here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.